Well, ladies and gentlemen and councillors, welcome to Rugby Borough Council's Planning Committee meeting this Wednesday the 8th of February. I am Councillor Tony Gillius, the chairman of this committee. The meeting is being web streamed to the public through the council's YouTube channel. During the meeting, when asked to speak, please use the push to talk button on the microphone in front of you. This will allow the camera to pan in your general direction and everyone to hear you. Before we begin the formal agenda, I'm obliged to read out the following fire notice. There is no fire drill scheduled in the building this evening. If the fire alarm sounds, then please could I ask that you make your way out of the building, down the main staircase and out of the main doors of the town hall and congregate at the entrance to Caldecott Park. An officer of the council will give instructions on when it is safe to return to the building. Moving on to the agenda, the first item of business is to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of January. All those in favour, please show. Okay, those minutes are now approved. Second item is to receive apologies. Do we have any apologies?
There are no apologies. All members are present.
Thank you. And then we can move on now to item 3 on the declaration of interests. Any non-pecuniary interests? Councillor Sanderson.
0722, the report mentions a property in close proximity to my own, so I will be vacating the chamber and not participating in the vote whilst that item is being considered. And the other one is St Cross, by virtue of being within my ward.
Any more non-pecuniary? Councillor Lawrence?
R22 1348 St Cross. My wife works at St Cross.
Item 6, Hospital of St Cross. I'm in Board of Trustees, Friends of St Cross, charity organisation. So I know where this is related. Thank you.
Any others? Councillor Mrs Beckett Mowdis?
Yeah, item R22 1144 and R22 1145, non-pecuniary interest by virtue of being an employee of Dudchurch Parish Council.
Any further non-pecuniaries? Apart from myself on item 2, which is R220861, Coombe Fields. Right, we'll move on then to pecuniary interests. Any pecuniary interests? No? Okay, and then item notice under section 106, Local Government Finance Act, non-payment of community charge or council tax, and we're all clear on that. Okay. Right, then we'll move on now to applications for consideration. There is going to be a slight change in the way these are going to be presented. We're going to move item 6 on the agenda up to item 3, so that the officer Lucy Davidson can present both without moving away from the chair here. I'm just going to read out the instructions now for guidance to speakers. The planning officer will speak first and present the application. The representatives for the objectors, the applicants and then the ward councillor will each be invited to speak. After each speaker, the committee members will be asked if they have any points of clarification from the speaker. Any ward member or councillor who speaks on the application as part of the public speaking process shall leave the meeting once all speakers have completed their presentations relating to it. Members of the committee will then go into debate on the application, asking relevant questions of the planning officer if necessary. A formal recommendation will be made and voted upon. The rules for public speaking. Speakers will have 3 minutes to make their presentation. They will be warned by a short alarm when they have 30 seconds left, and then a further alarm will sound when their time has expired. The presentation should then be brought to a halt. No extra time will be allowed. All speakers should direct their presentations to amplifying the planning matters they have previously put to us for the benefit of the planning committee. Speakers should restrict their comments to material planning considerations only. Any non-planning issues will be disregarded. Speakers should not introduce any additional information that has not been previously brought to the planning authority's attention, i.e. introduce late items that have not been suitably considered by officers and properly addressed in the officer's report to planning committee for members' deliberation. No visual aids or handouts may be used, and no questions to officers or members will be allowed. No members of the public are allowed to take part in the debate once their presentation has been given. And so now we'll move on to Ewan, who's going to present to us item 1 for items for consideration, 50 Windsor Street.
Good evening. This is a full planning application reference number R22/0722 at 50 Windsor Street for a loft conversion and change of use to a sui generis 7-bed HMO. The application is being reported to the Planning Committee in accordance with the scheme of delegation, as Councillor Harrington called in the application following concerns regarding noise and disturbance, traffic generation, traffic and parking, and highway safety issues. The picture on this slide shows the site location plan. 50 Windsor Street is a mid-terrace 2-storey property with a 2-storey projecting outrigger and an existing single-storey rear extension. Moving on to the second slide, this is an aerial photo of the site.
Sorry, Chair, can I just interrupt? Sorry to interrupt you, but is there any way you can switch these two screens over? We're all on this side of the room and the pictures are on that side.
Could I just, because of technical problems we have, the presentation is going to be presented only on that screen there. So I've got no screen at all here. I'm looking at mine off piece of paper. So the cameras are going to be that side, presentation this side.
Oh, Veronica can have a quick look, see if we can.
So this is an aerial photo which shows the location of the site in the context of the surrounding streets, with Bridge Street to the east and Cambridge Street to the west. Between number 50 and 52 is an alleyway which leads to the private amenity space, which will allow bins to be moved to the curb on collection day and access to bicycles to utilise the cycle store proposed to the rear of the property. Moving on to site photos, the first photo shows the front elevation of the site and also shows the alleyway between number 50 and 52. Photo 2 shows the 2-storey outrigger and the single-storey extension along with the private amenity space to the rear of the property. And photo 3 shows the rear elevation of the property. The map on this slide shows the existing traffic regulation orders in force in the vicinity of the site. The 3 photos show the junction with Sun Street. Currently, there are no TROs in operation to prevent vehicles parking close/on the junction. Only bollards are present to discourage parking. Moving on to the proposed floor plans. The ground floor will comprise of 2 bedrooms and an open plan kitchen and lounge area. The first floor will comprise of 3 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms will be located on the second floor. All bedrooms will have ensuite bathrooms and will be single occupancy, meaning there will be a maximum of 7 occupants living at the property. Condition 7 is recommended to restrict the HMO to 7 occupants. It should be noted that not all conversions of residential properties to HMO requires planning permission. The change of use to a small HMO, defined as being between 3 and 6 occupants, does not require planning permission. This is for 7 occupants, so the application is required essentially for the 1 extra occupant. The application includes an L-shaped dormer. The dormer will be located on the main rear roof slope and on the roof slope of the rear projecting 2-storey outrigger. The dormer will have a volume of approximately 47 cubic metres and will be tile hung. 2 windows are to be inserted on the rear elevation and 1 window in the side elevation. Minor external alterations are proposed to the property, which include the insertion of a Felix skylight in the front roof slope, and then 1 existing window at ground floor level on the rear elevation will be removed and replaced by a door, and a window on the side elevation at ground floor level will be removed and replaced by a full height window. In the rear garden, a cycle storage shelter is proposed of facing brick construction and will be able to accommodate at least 7 bicycles. Also to the rear will be a bin storage area. In terms of technical consultative responses, the Highway Authority have no objection subject to condition 4, which is to do with the implementation of the TRO and then the obligation towards the TRO. Ecology have recommended informatives 5, 6 and 7, which is to do with bat, bird and biodiversity enhancement notes. And Environmental Health have recommended condition 8, which is and informatives 1, 2, 3 and 4, and are satisfied with the development from an air quality perspective. The Work Services Department have not objected and recommend informative 8 to do with waste collection. So moving on to neighbour comments, there's been 3 household objections to the application, and the objections largely cover impact on property values, increase in HMOs in the Ben ward, impact on parking, construction work, the dormer design and the size of it, and then the loss of street community. A full summary can be found within the report. Moving on to the main considerations, the principle of development. The application site is located within Rugby Town, which is the most sustainable location in the borough. It's got the best access to a range of services and facilities, and it's the main focus for all development. In terms of character and design, the dormer is located to the rear of the property and will not project beyond the ridgeline of the property. Given the property is mid-terraced, the dormer will not be visible from the street scene. The dormer has a volume of approximately 47 cubic metres, which is marginally greater than a 40 cubic metre dormer, which could be achieved under permitted development. The Velux skylight to the front will not be a prominent feature. The other external alterations and bin and cycle storage will not have a material impact on the street scene, given that they're to the rear of the property. In terms of ecological considerations, protected species are not anticipated to be impacted by the development. Suitable informatives are recommended. In terms of air quality, the proposed boiler is highly efficient, lowering carbon emissions. It's A-rated. Development promotes the use of bicycles rather than the private car through provision of secure undercover bicycle storage, which will assist in lowering emissions. Environmental Health are satisfied with the air quality measures. Moving on to the impact on residential amenity, the proposed windows in the rear elevation of the dormer will not cause significant additional overlooking over and above the existing windows at first floor level. The window in the rear elevation of the dormer will cause a small degree of overlooking to the terrace at number 48, but given the relationship, it will not be result in considerable direct overlooking. In addition, a dormer, albeit with a slightly smaller volume, could be constructed which has windows in a similar location without planning permission. The window in the side elevation of the dormer will be conditioned to be obscure glazed and non-opening below a height of 1.7 metres measured from the internal finished floor level. The dormer will not cause significant loss of light to any adjoining properties. The proposed skylight in the front roof slope will not cause significant overlooking over and above the existing windows on the front elevation of the property. Similarly, the window alterations will not cause additional loss of privacy. The cycle storage shelter will not cause a detrimental loss of light to any surrounding properties when considering the height, existing light levels and built form. It could also be constructed under permitted development. The HMO will be subject to a separate licensing process to ensure compliance with legislation separate to planning. Any noise, waste, parking or antisocial behaviour complaints would be dealt with separately. Moving on to highway safety and parking, Section 9 of the MPPF makes it clear that applications should only be refused on highway grounds if there be an unacceptable impact on highway safety or the residual cumulative impacts on the road network would be severe. The parking standards within the local plan state each HMO will be assessed on its own merits. It is acknowledged that the property may have an increase in the number of occupants over the current use, which may increase the number of associated vehicles. On balance, there is considered to be suitable parking facilities to support this application when considering the application site is located in a highly sustainable location. It's approximately 800 metres to the train station and 800 metres to the town centre. There are also bus stops in the vicinity, such as on Clifton Road, and the site is in an area with an access to an array of services and facilities accessible by foot, bicycle or public transport. The applicant is providing cycle storage, which reduces reliance on the private car and helps shift towards sustainable modes of travel. On 2 separate visits to the site, the percentage of available parking on Windsor Street was approximately over 25%. However, it is noted that the visits were at times when parking demand would generally not be at its greatest level. The property could be converted to a 6-occupant HMO without planning permission. The potential additional demand for parking generated by 1 extra occupant will not be significant. The Highway Authority has no objection to the application, subject to condition 4 and the TRO obligation. So that, as already mentioned, the junction with Sun Street has no traffic regulation order to prevent parking on the junction. It has bollards to discourage parking, however. So to address the highway safety concerns raised by the Highway Authority, the applicant proposed and agreed to contribute towards a TRO in the form of double yellow lines. The Highway Authority has requested a sum of £3,000 for the implementation of the TRO, which is to be secured through a Section 106 agreement. With the agreement to implement the TRO, the Highway Authority are able to mitigate concerns of highway safety, and the civil parking enforcement team, as well as the police, are able to find and remove dangerously parked vehicles. With the existing TRO at the junction with Clifton Road and the TRO to be implemented at the junction with Sun Street, it's considered that vehicles will be constrained to parking where they will not have a detrimental impact on highway safety and operation. Moving on to the planning balance and recommendation. The site is located within the most sustainable location in the borough, with access to a range of services and facilities. The proposed dormer and external alterations will not have a significant impact on the character and appearance of the area. The proposals will not have an unduly detrimental impact on the amenities of the surrounding properties. The proposals are unlikely to have a detrimental impact on highway safety, which is mitigated by the obligation towards the implementation of a TRO. Therefore, the recommendation is to approve, subject to the conditions, informatives, and the completion of a Section 106 to secure the planning obligation outlined in the heads of terms within the report. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any points of clarification for the officer? Councillor Eccleston.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I note the objections from the neighbours. Any of those valid objections?
Yes, I've made it clear in the report that we did receive some objections to the applications which aren't material planning considerations, such as damage to property, concerns to do with health and safety. They are dealt with by separate legislation, such as building control and the health and safety executive. but I think the rest of them are material planning considerations, apart from the impact on property values actually isn't.
Councillor Willis.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies if this is at the wrong point and things move to debate. On the last slide, we're advised that the development complies with the local plan, and yet we now know that we will be reviewing that local plan in the near future, and consideration will be given to a policy, an HMO policy, which is currently lacking. Lacking, I think, is the right word, and at the last planning committee, I think I was quite vocal in saying, members and officers, it's been a long time, can we just get on with it? Words to that effect. I'm concerned that in the absence of a policy and trying to understand the difference between where planning stops and licensing begins, notwithstanding work has already started on this property, notwithstanding it doesn't breach planning control, I would actually like to see that for myself with you and perhaps advising the committee of why this should be approved. So we can also observe, as we have done before on site visits, the traffic issues, a feel of just what is being experienced by the numerous objectors to these developments, particularly in Ben Ward, which I think now must be hitting something like 120 HMOs. I'm looking to Councillor Harrington. 119. 19. This makes 120. Yeah. Thank you for that. I'm proposing deferral for a site visit so that we can perhaps understand a little more prior to a planning services meeting when we will start to consider policy on HMOs, so that perhaps those members of the committee who weren't on the committee last year have the opportunity to see construction of an HMO close up, I believe, and I think it may have been the applicant, and again appreciate we can only look at the application in front of us. I think it would be helpful, certainly from my benefit, and I can't speak to anybody else in the room, to actually have a site visit so that we can understand the issues both on construction and indeed for the surrounding community. A proposal for a site visit, Chair, and again I'm more than happy to hear words from the officers as to why that wouldn't be appropriate.
I'd like to, as the Chair, go through the process of listening to all the speakers and have a debate, and should that proposal come forward at that point, then we could have a vote on it. But I'd like to hear the speakers, and I'm sure the members would like to hear the speakers, so that we can establish what is the best course of action, and that debate will guide us in that direction.
Apologies, I did apologise at the front. I felt it may have been at the wrong point, but I wasn't sure it was a point of clarification.
Thank you, Councillor Willard.
Thank you, Chair.
We've got Councillor Mrs Brown next.
It's okay, I'll wait till after the debate, thank you.
Right, we've got Councillor Lawrence.
Just like to clarify a point on the parking issue. In your summary, you stated 25% was. However, in your report, it was caveated that you weren't necessarily observing during the peak times. Can I just confirm that to be the instance?
Yeah, the 25% was just an observation I made while on site. I mean, the times I went on site was probably between, one of them was about 9:30 in the morning, and then the other was just after that, but they're both AM times.
Okay, so I appreciate that. So you didn't look at it during the evening where you might have expected peak parking. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Slinger next. These are points of clarification. Councillor Srivasafa.
Referring to the report, Warwickshire County Council had no objection now. But in the beginning, they said, if I can read, put my glasses first, that they were concerned with the demand of parking in an area which has already had significant demand on-street parking and whether this additional demand can be accommodated. I know they have got no objections. What information they were given? Can we have some data on this?
So the reason they initially objected, like you said, was to do with parking generated by the HMO. But the issue is that the junction with Sun Street, they were concerned that the additional parking generated by the HMO would lead to highway safety concerns, given that there was no TRO at the junction. So essentially, cars could then park on the junction. So it was proposed that, so they essentially wanted a parking survey. The applicant decided it'd be more meaningful in public benefit and highway benefit to implement and pay for the TRO. Then essentially parking will now be constrained to areas where it's safe to park. So essentially they remove their objections. They can only look at things from a highway safety perspective. So with the implementation of TRO, there's going to be, should be no detrimental impact on highway safety and operation.
I think there is a lack of information, and I would go with the proposal suggested by the differing. Now, another thing in the report it said.
Councillor, these are points of clarification. We're not in a debate. We're points of clarification on the officer's report. Councillor Slinger.
A point of clarification that I would like is how many parking permits this property would be likely to have. Apologies if I missed it in the report, but if this were permitted.
So this area isn't constrained by parking permits, it falls outside.
Right, we're going to move on to the speakers now, and we've got Councillor Richard Harrington who's speaking on behalf of the objectors because the actual speaker is not able to attend tonight, and we've given Councillor Harrington permission to speak in his place.
Thank you, Chair. This is for Mr Chamberlain. I've been a homeowner for 52 Windsor Street for 30 years. The director of the company spoke to me regarding the work and said it would be considered because contractors, final occupants, we professional people. The property was already been an unregistered HMO for years, no checks, multiple documents that change regularly, and we were pleased to hear of the changes. Work commenced, stripping out were immediate issues of parking traffic due to the huge amount of debris placed on the street, unsafe manner, left over several weeks, before cleared at the developer's expense. The contractors had abandoned the site without completing the work. Week commencing the 12th of September, I checked the planning application for my initial concerns. No planning application on the portal, so I called the council information and nothing's been submitted yet. We received a letter regarding planning permission on the 16th of September and the portal was updated. We spoke briefly to the contractors on phase 1 construction and commenced the works stated. If there are any problems, please let me know. On return of holiday on 1st of October, I find contractors throwing building material over height with no safety controls in place and debris landed in the rear of hitting our garden furniture. This was reported immediately to the contractor and developer and verbally and in writing. No response was given in writing, but the contractor, followed by a phone call, refused to acknowledge responsibility. The issues have continued, reported to Warwickshire Building Control and HSE. Issues including potential collapse of a shared entry due to unsafe removal of structures, scaffolding being brought through unsafe and erected as priority due potential collapse of the roof structures. Further debris are thrown over the height and resulting damage to my rear door. Concerns are also raised over the behaviour and attitude of the builders, as my wife works from home as a registered childminder with young and vulnerable children in her care that leave access at home. At the rear of the property, entries such as consideration exposed for safety risks, loss of privacy, security, plus loud inappropriate language from the builders. In November 22, there's informed that extension could not continue without a rail erected on our roof, access to our roof. We met with the contractor on Wednesday 23rd November, expressed constant concerns again over the builders who told that we provided clear agreements in writing that access was only required for 1 calendar week and the damage was covered. We are also told that the builders will be speaking to us on a regular basis regarding damaged door. Scaffolding was erected without our permission being granted, and on 25th of November, Ray responded by writing in form to say he was shocked about the scaffolding immediately. We did allow the scaffoldings and rails erected, but immediately had to report the holes in the party wall created by contracting resulting in being able to see straight through to number 50 and being able to see right through the works. So basically, I should stop.
Thanks for that presentation. I know there's lots of points raised in your...
I'll go through what I'll do is I'll try and put a couple of them into my speech just to raise some concerns as well.
That's what I was going to suggest, yes. So could you just cancel your microphone? Thank you. So we'll now move on to the applicant, Mr. Ray Yim, who's going to have 3 minutes.
Hello, good evening. Yes, so first of all, I will mention that this is an application for a change of use to 7-person HMO for 7 bedrooms. There are no objections from technical consultees, so I'd like to remind all local councillors of that, no objections on the technical consultees. There are obviously third-party concerns. First of all, I will address the one that Councillor Harrington has kindly pointed out. The building contractor issues, they have been dealt with in the appropriate procedures with building control and HSE, and there have actually been no issues as a result of that. So please, consider that. I'll move back on to concerns about HMO. We have an impeccable track record, and none of our HMOs in Rugby have ever had a report on antisocial behaviour. All tenants are vetted extremely carefully, and we must ensure that a character assessment is done on each of the tenants, providing full referencing and credit checks. Parking, there is currently a no park permit road, but if permits were introduced, the property would be permitted up to a maximum of 3 permits. If we consider that this was a permit road and look at the facts in terms of our tenants across Rugby who actually have vehicles, we're looking at an average of 30%. So if we equate that into the number of bedrooms or people in this HMO, that equates to 2 vehicles, so still under the threshold for the permits. Well, we also look at the main reason why our HMOs are we're proud of is because that we promote a co-living philosophy. So our tenants, they're not just purely living together. There is harmony between them, and we always search for the best tenants available. We also, because of a mortgage stipulation, we're restricted to just professional tenants. So our tenants are, credible people who help the society rather than the more slightly difficult tenants. We are a great example of a leading HMO provider. And we also, I just want to mention that I personally live in Rugby. I've been a Rugby resident for 5 years. And we, as a business, we employ over 20 local professionals, including tradesmen, administrators, cleaners, etc. And final point is our properties are renovated to an extremely high standard. And this application supports policy GP2 of the local plan for sustainable urban extensions. Thank you.
Right, have we got any points of clarification? Councillor Adam Daly.
Thanks, Chair. I feel a sense of deja vu. I think this is the 3rd time that you've presented since I've been on this committee. I wondered if this is the moment where Sarah normally says that the occupants is not a material planning concern.
You took the words right out of my mouth, Councillor Daly. Thanks for paying attention.
I just had a question about this application. Can you just explain your involvement with the Highways Authority? So obviously they raised a concern about parking in the area. What was it that? How did you come to the agreement, or how did you come to the decision that you'd be paying the £3,000 for the double yellow lines, rather than maybe there being a parking survey undertaken?
Yeah, I really like that question. Thank you. So we want to work with Rugby Council. As I said, I'm a Rugby resident, and really the parking survey is rather subjective, how it's actually structured. It wouldn't really tell us very much information. What I want to do is actually work with the Highways Authority to get to a reasonable solution, and that's why we proposed the best option really to combat this issue with this particular road was to improve it in terms of the safety. And if we look at Sun Street and also the other junction, if we restricted it with some TROs as suggested by Highways, this is the best option. I'd rather pay more to improve that road than just pay £2,000 for a meaningless survey. And that's exactly the approach that we've always undertaken. It's really for the benefit of the council rather than just independent lowest cost.
Councillor Willis.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things, Mr. Yimmers. My colleague Councillor Daly pointed out, this is the third time I think we've seen you in 12 months. The property space portfolio looks incredibly attractive. The Chester and the Saint in Rugby. And I go back to the point which I was rightly pulled back on in terms of where I placed it, but I'll chance my arm, as it were, here. We will be looking at policy going forward. Chester and Saint look to be quality developments. Would you be willing to allow members of the committee to visit one of the schemes that you've already developed, see the interior, look at what an HMO really is about? I say that having, the third time you've been here. I know this is, I think, part of the Abacus group rather than property space, but assuming that the build is the same, would that be possible? And that it also, if possible, to perhaps meet some of those residents as part of the working group. I appreciate, Chair, it's not point of clarification, but I think it's something going forward if we are looking at HMOs as in the wider context.
Again, I really like that, and as a Rugby resident, as I've said, I'm very willing to work and cooperate with local councillors. So yes, I would be very happy for councillors to come have a look at our HMOs and see why they are working, and not just sort of throw stones from afar and make wild accusations or assumptions on parking conditions. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further points of clarification? Councillor Singer.
Thank you for your presentation. Do you find with your properties that your tenants generally use bicycles to get to work? And if so, roughly what proportion of your tenants do you find make use of the provision of cycle storage and use bicycles to travel to their jobs as professionals?
Honestly speaking, we don't have that many who actually use the cycles. So I think, personally speaking, no, they don't need that number of cycle storage. Most of them actually use public transport. So either public transport or walking. And for those that can afford the vehicles, they drive. But generally, our tenants that basically we take on, they generally do not have vehicles and they don't need the vehicle for their work. So that's the sort of people that we take on, and as I was saying earlier, if some of our tenants are happy to be interviewed or even just spoken to some of the local councillors, I'd be very happy just to show what type of characters we have.
Any further points of clarification for them?
So building on the excellent point that Councillor Daly has already made, the identity of the tenant is not a material planning consideration, nor is the manner in which an applicant might run their business a material planning consideration. And just to remind councillors, that's because any planning permission that is granted runs with the land. So even if the current applicant sells on the property, they will still have the benefit of that HMO planning permission if it was approved. And we have no knowledge of how a future owner or tenant of that property may operate in terms of their behaviour or how they run their business. So just worth bearing in mind, and that's why those factors aren't material planning considerations, just to reinforce that back to you.
Sorry, just want to make one more point. I'm very... Is it okay?
No.
No?
That's
okay.
it. Okay. We've got to make it fair for everybody. Okay. Right. Right, we're going to move on to Councillor Harrington next. He's going to have his 3 minutes, and at the end of that, we can ask points of clarification from Councillor Harrington.
Yeah, good evening all. Let's go through the stats like I normally do. So we've got 196 HMOs within the ward. 119 of them are in Ben. That's 61%. Currently on Windsor Street, you have 3 HMOs at 32, 8 and 40. So you've got a 5-bed, 6-bed and another 6-bed. Total up to, and if everyone did have a car, would be 17 cars. So if you take out an average family may have 2 cars, that's 6 extra spaces will be taken up by these HMOs, plus you've got the HMO coming, which is 7 properties. The development was rejected on highway safety, and basically because of, and now the developer is going to give money to put in for double yellow lines. And I just want to clarify something in what's said from the planning. The yellow lines will not be, won't be touched, because it's not in the parking permit area, so no wardens will go and touch it. Also, we haven't got a 24-hour police station in Rugby. So to be honest with you, the police won't be looking at this. So we will have the same with other areas of Ben, people parking on double yellow lines. So for this to paint onto the road, I don't think will make any difference to safety. I think it'll actually make it worse. So I think we should be rejecting this on highway safety. Reason being is because of the we've got issues getting down the road. It's a very tight road. There's a tight bend at the bottom. You've got Sun Street as well as T Junction, and also it's not permitted. So there's no restriction on parking. So you have no restrictions like you would do with the other one. And that's normally a get out of free child card, which Warwickshire County Council uses. So what I think at the moment is, I think the issue we've got is, and we're here again regarding HMOs. We had one petition of 500. We've had a second petition, it's like 330. I'm trying to speak to LGA to get some advice on how to get this sorted, because I think we need everyone in the room, councillors, county councillors, planners, to get something in place, because it's not fair on the residents. It's enough is enough. We're not against HMOs, no be it. It's just making sure it's a fair amount and it's spread out equally, and making sure the facilities are there. Currently, the facilities, we're getting no data from Warwickshire County Council, and actually reducing the parking for the double yellow lines, how can that make it be more capacity for people to be there? And for me, it does not make any sense. So for tonight, we have a lot of people watching this tonight and have campaigned against it. But for me personally tonight is, hopefully after this meeting, we can get together, because that's what I want to do. And also to make it fair for residents and property owners, because at the moment, property owners get out all the rights, because they can do a 6-bedroom with no permission. What rights do the residents have? They live there, and in this case, this gentleman's lived there for 30 years. He's actually considering to move because of the stress it's caused him. Thank you for listening.
Right, we move on to points of clarification. Councillor Willis.
Thank you, Chair. Very quickly, and thank you for the stats, Councillor Harrington. 119 has become enough is enough. Can we just rewind that a little bit? At what point did enough become enough? Because 119 is a lot of building works across the ward. At what point did actually it move from being acceptable to unacceptable? And if you don't have the response, I acknowledge that, you know, it isn't there to be a tripwire. It's just trying to understand the mechanics of going, actually, when did this become a real problem for yourself and the community you represent?
Before being a councillor, I did a lot of work regarding concern with Rotarians against parking proposals regarding parking permits. So that was 4 or 5 years ago. This has been going on since then. There's been concerns as well. I mean, the biggest thing for us is the unregistered HMOs, because at the moment, no one knows what we've got. And I've spoken to officers, and that can be added to the plan to register it like it does in Coventry City Council. So for me personally, it's the registered ones are generally a good condition, but the problem is to have the protection for residents who are using them. The unregistered HMOs don't have the same jurisdiction because the registered ones. And I think the problem is, because we don't know what is going on, we haven't got the data. That's the reason why I think at the moment there's a big concern. It's not all about, I mean, there's 119. I reckon there's a lot more than that within Ben Ward, but we just don't know. And I've spoken to officers and they just don't know anything about it. So without the data, I feel sorry for the planners because they haven't got the information at their hands to make it a really good decision.
Thank you, Councillor. That actually the pieces of the jigsaw that we didn't have. So many thanks for that.
Points of clarification, any other? Councillor Eccleston.
Councillor Harrington, it's a small point, but it's my industry. You made a statement about you felt it was a highway safety issue. Are you a professional highway safety person?
I'm not a professional highway safety profession.
Then, because we use the Warwickshire County Council Highways Department, I would suggest that if they consider it safe, then it should be safe. I understand the practicality of people parking on double yellow lines, but I'm just making the point, because you made the point that you felt it was a safety issue. They don't, and they're the professionals.
Can I come back to that? Thank you. Yes, they are the professionals, but the problem is they don't give you the data. I've asked for it quite a few times for the data and they don't tell you, especially with houses, with HMOs within, so like within permitted areas, it doesn't tell you facilities, and also it doesn't tell you facilities from 8 o'clock at night and 8 o'clock in the morning. So they may be the professionals, but they are keeping data very secret to themselves. I've asked and asked and no one's got back to me. So if we've got the data saying there is enough, measure the street, here's the parking spaces for the properties here, then yes, great. But Warwickshire County Council haven't done that, and that's what I said at the end of my speech, is we need to get Warwickshire County Council in the same room, plus councillors, plus planners and chief officers to get this thrashed out, because at the moment, I bet it's just coming back here again and again and again. It's doing the same thing, and it's not fair on the residents, not fair on the people who are trying to put the permission through, and also our time as well. So I think we can do something about it. But as I said, the petition was added in May, and we haven't had anything done since then. It's February now. We need to do something.
Thanks for that, Councillor Harrington. Right, we're going to move into debate now, so I'm going to ask you to leave the room. Yep. And thanks for that input. Right, have we got any speakers? Councillor Mrs Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to hear that the behaviours and attitudes of the builders that have been involved in this, that's been dealt with. If it hadn't have been, it would be quite difficult to use it against planning permission, because I don't think it precludes permission being given. However, the kind of behaviours that they have exhibited clearly are unacceptable in those circumstances, so I'm pleased that's been sorted out. I don't need to see inside the HMO, although I am very nosy and I would like to see. I know they're finished to high spec, because it's not the first time we've seen you present, and you know you've shown us images of what they're like inside. The thing that concerns me most is the impact on highway safety, and I take Councillor Eccleston's point about the expertise of county council specialists in this. However, they did see the need for double yellow lines to enhance the safety on the road and on that junction. And I have to say that double yellow lines haven't got a very successful history in terms of controlling poor parking behaviours in areas like this. So I would like to see the pressures that are on that junction. As Councillor Harrington said, we don't really know, other than county have said, look, you know, we mean well, trust us, we know what we're doing. That's fine to one extent. But we've got to talk to residents with our hands on our hearts and say, okay, we think that we've investigated it fully and we know that you will be safer because of these double yellow lines. I'm unconvinced that that's the case, and I would like to see A, harder evidence that they work, and B, I'd like a visit actually to the junction there and to the area at the bottom. It gets narrower, doesn't it, as you get to the bottom, and I'd like to have a look at that, because I think it's putting an immense amount of pressure already on that road without the potential for additional parking there. Parking pressures, rather. Thank you,
thanks,
Chair.
Yeah, I'm probably at an advantage over most of you because, you know, I've worked in literally hundreds of those terraced houses, and I count up the other day, I worked in 36 streets around the centre of Rugby on literally hundreds of houses when we went through a campaign in the 1970s and 80s where this council gave grant money for builders to totally refurbish those poorly maintained terraced houses into something that any one of us would have loved to have gone into to move into. They were fantastic. The difficulty is with the structure of those buildings, they're dead easy to convert to a multiple occupancy. That is the benefit of those terraced houses. And I know there's quite a number of them that have been divided into 2 flats, up and down, and some in the 3rd flat, up, down, and a little extension at the back. But I'm interested to hear other councillors' points of view, and we've got Councillor Eccleston.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to come back to Councillor Brown here, and I'm sorry to be pedantic about this, but you know, we started to debate the law here. Double yellow lines is illegal. It's illegal to park on double yellow lines, as it is illegal to park on the pavements, and we see it all around Rugby all of the time. I'm not saying it's right at all. I'm not saying it's right, but you know, we can't debate national traffic law in this planning meeting. Secondly, on the property itself, it is a bit of a quandary. It's already a HMO. It already has 6 occupants. What we're really debating here, I guess, is the additional occupant. And also, we have declared in this borough a demand for more rented properties or more properties available for rental. So it's a quandary really for us. Well, certainly a quandary for me. I'm sitting here thinking, is this right or is it wrong at the moment? I'm hearing the arguments. I'm hearing the arguments of the neighbours. I'm hearing the arguments about the numbers of HMOs already in our borough. My gut feel is, why do we want to penalise this particular one? That's all. And we're using traffic regulations to try and penalise it. That seems to be the main argument at the moment, over parking. That's all.
Councillor Willis.
Thank you, Chair. I'll go back to my untimely request to defer for a site visit, and I haven't heard anything since that has moved my opinion on that. There are things we touched on the traffic, and Councillor Eccleston is wholly correct. We're not here to debate national guidance. We're looking at local guidance. We have issues where planning stops, and licensing finishes. We have a blurred line that on a number of occasions we've had to be pulled up because we've strayed into that area, and indeed we could say that many of those issues are captured within Ewan's report. Many of us on the committee, or many members of the committee, will not have visited an HMO and understand exactly what the issues are that are being raised. I would proposing, as I was at the top, we defer for a site visit so that we can understand, be talked through those issues that have been raised. I have another point as well, and I think Councillor Harrington summarised this quite well in terms of the number of illegal HMOs. We have some sort of ballpark figure as the housing authority of just what those numbers are and the impact they're having. Surely a number of housing benefit inquiries from a certain address will generate interest in terms of the numbers coming forward. Do we have some sort of potential to cross-reference that? So if we're seeing 6, it won't all be a benefit, but we need or universal credit. What are we doing to, I suppose, control the level of illegal HMOs? Thank you, Chair.
So just to answer the latter half of your question, I think there's a distinction between illegal HMOs and small HMOs that don't fall into the planning and licensing regime. I'm not aware that we have a particular problem with illegal HMOs, but I think the point that Councillor Harrington was raising was that there are a lot of small HMOs which don't require planning permission and don't require licensing because they don't fall within the regulatory regimes. Now, with those, we don't have any clear data on those because the identity of the tenants may not be those that are in receipt of benefits or universal credit. So there's no real way of fact-checking or data-checking how many of those there are, unfortunately, and it's not data we as officers currently hold.
Thank you.
Got Councillor Slinger next.
Thank you, Chair. On the point about data, I've raised this issue in the full council meetings before, and I understand that the team is doing all it can to ascertain the situation around smaller HMOs and potentially illegal ones, and I look forward to hearing more about that in due course. Regarding Councillor Willis's suggestion, although not a motion yet, to defer, I would be inclined to agree with that. I don't feel I'm in possession of enough of information, but I would also just want to ask officers and debate with colleagues on the committee, if we are to go and do a site visit to see an HMO, oughtn't we also to visit the residents of the house in question? Because one of my concerns, going back a long time now, is that, and it's not in any way the fault of the applicant, but the concerns of residents are very hard to give weight to as we deliberate in this committee. And if we're going to go and see the, I'm sure, excellent conversion that's being done, I believe it's incumbent upon us to also go and do a visit and meet with those who have got particular concerns, who are the long-standing residents who make up that community, which has by far the most HMOs in the borough.
Right, we've got Councillor Silverstaver and then Councillor Eccleston.
Thank you, Chair. I also support the defer to this one, because we have got a lot of information we have to understand. We are getting more and more applications for HMOs. HMOs the residents need to live somewhere. But I think there are a lot of issues. For the character of this area is changing. Parking is a great problem. Warwickshire County Council is professional, but I think we need some more data from them, which could be, we can understand what time they did the analysis, what are the data available to them. And we have to see, we have to go and see sometime 8 o'clock evening and see what the situation is on the road. And that's a safety issues. Quite some time. So I think a lot of understanding is needed. We need HMO policy. There are licensing issues which has been highlighted. I would prefer deferment and to understand this completely with you and officers, everybody together.
Eccleston.
Sorry, I think I have got my pedantic hat on tonight, and this is a question for legal here because I'm still confused. Are we discussing this planning application, or are we discussing the need for HMOs and what's licensed and what's unlicensed in Rugby, or are we concentrating on this? Because the number of times I've sat in this meeting and I've deviated from the subject in hand and the planning permission in hand, and I've been put back in my place by the legal officer. You could probably count it on 10 hands. So are we discussing this planning application? Please tell me.
Thank you, Councillor Eccleston. And I think for members of Planning Committee, from the past couple of months where we've debated the policy point, we do need to bring it back to the planning application that is in front of us. We've answered the policy point previously. It's been brought up in full council. This is not the forum to debate the need for the policy or when the policy is going to be brought in or what the policy looks like, unfortunately. We understand your concerns, but this is about the application that's directly in front of us and how it accords with our current local plan.
Yes, thank you for that, Sarah. And just to add to that, as councillors will know, councillors did meet in December and have agreed a timetable now for reviewing the new local plan, so it will form part of that and any other policies that may come forward.
Just to remind members that, of course, if this particular application is approved, then it comes with a lot of conditions and informatives. If it isn't, then you could still have the 6 people living there without any conditions, without any informatives, you know, and that is where the public can watch this, if it is approved, with the conditions attached, or any additional conditions, if they so wish, then that is a more of a safeguard for the surrounding community. So we've got other speakers. We've got Councillor Maudis.
Thank you, Chair. It is on this application, but it is going back to the parking issue. It was just over 25% when the planner, the officer visited the site, but it wasn't at a busy site. If the TRO is then going to put double yellows, therefore reducing the parking, I would feel far more comfortable with this had we have had that planning survey, rather than what we've got. Thank you.
So the TRO won't reduce parking capacity on Windsor Street because of where the existing curbs and bollards are. It would only prevent parking on the junction. It won't reduce parking capacity on Windsor Street at all. It's simply there to allow the police and the parking enforcement team to remove cars from parking at the junction.
Councillor Lawrence.
I come here as a member of Rugby Borough. I do have a job, however, and I work in the infrastructure and transport department of a company which happens to be one of the principal designers for national highways. Okay, I'm not talking at all on that perspective, but I respond to one of my other councillors on this subject. So my conversation is therefore going to be about anomaly on parking. So National Highways, the Highways Authority should already had double yellow lines on this junction. It has bollards on it. It should have had double yellow lines already. So it seems to be nothing to do with this planning at all. They found somebody to pay for it, which is very convenient for them, but they should have been there already. So the issue is actually one going back to parking. So the issue is that this street, which is a one-way road when you parked up on both sides of the street, I have no understanding of what level of parking is there during the evening period. It's going to be less than 25%, is my understanding from the conversation. You will need that access anyway to be able to get down the street because the car will come the other way. You're not going to reverse all the way down the street. So that's and without a site visit, I wouldn't really understand those dimensions. So I have an issue just with the sheer number of people being put into this place. It could have been 6, it could have been 5, and we're pushing it to the maximum. So if I was going to mitigate this, if there was an option to mitigate this, it would to be make the HMO smaller because of the intensity. We have no reserved parking on this street. The other times we've considered this, there's been reserved parking. You can control the parking. From what I've heard, there's no control of parking on this street. So parking is going to be an issue.
This is just a theoretical question, but would one additional occupant really cause a significant additional parking constraint? That's what we've got to look at, really, take a pragmatic approach.
It said it's a case of mitigation, right? Can you reduce the level of the issue? Okay, so what is Highways doing by putting double yellow lines on it? There was already bollards there. They were just mitigating an issue that was already there, right? So we are talking about how we mitigate parking. It's not to do with safety on the junction. It's about mitigating the parking issue, and that would be to reduce the size of the HMO.
Councillor Silverstaver?
Just a comment on the report. And it says the proposed dormer is of large size and scale. The overall volume is approximately so and so feet, only of a marginally greater. So there is some consideration. This is larger size than what it should be. I think visit to the site might be able to explain us what this marginal expectation is.
Spoken considerably about a site visit, but we've had no proposer or a seconder for that. Is that the sort of direction you would want to be going in? A site visit, just to clarify in members' minds exactly what they're going to be approving? Is that what you're after?
I think that's where I was, well, that is where I was coming from at the top of this conversation, Chair. Apologies if I didn't sort of vocalise that when we got to debate, but I'd left it hanging there, so yes, please take that as a proposal.
Okay, and do we have a seconder for that? Okay, and so we've got a proposer and a seconder. And I think Councillor Slinger seconded it earlier. Okay. So do you want to put that to the vote? So we put that to the vote now then, that we defer this for a site visit?
Could we just clarify the site visit?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just want to clarify one point so members are clear with this in their own minds, because it was mentioned in the discussions, was that committee site visits in our constitution have a very clear definition about who shall attend, and that is basically down to members of the planning committee, representatives of the planning department, so like myself or the case officer, and then the applicant or their representatives. No one else is permitted on that site visit to make sure it's then fair for all. I appreciate we may be dealing with people living there, but obviously they can obviously make sure that they're sort of out the way. But I just want to make sure that members weren't expecting to be able to sort of like, to some extent, interview residents. Thank you.
Is it possible to get from some highway authorities somebody in that visit?
I mean, again, through you, Chair, we can ask the question, but I don't know whether they would be able to be in attendance.
Councillor Bill Lewis, and then we've had a proposer and a seconder, and after Bill Lewis has spoken, then we'll move to a vote. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, is the site visit just to visit the site, or is it to visit the property as well, which would need permission from the owners and so on, and occupiers?
I'll go back to the proposer. Is it you want to visit the dwelling and the location and the street scene?
Ideally, the dwelling and the location, so we can, I suppose, understand all aspects that are under consideration, Chair.
And just for clarification, that is completely acceptable to visit the property that's under consideration in this application and the surrounding area to get a feel for it, and that's what we've done at other site visits. It wouldn't be a tour of any other HMOs for comparative purposes, just to make that clear as well to members. I'm picking up on the point because I think you have raised questions about residents' views. The planning officer will be able to make copies of any representations we've had from residents in full available to you. If any members would like to read those in full, just contact the planning officer in question. We can send those over to you.
Okay, so we have got a proposer and a seconder for deferral. All those in favour, please show. And all those against, please show. Okay. So that's carried. So that's to be deferred. Right, we're going to move on now to, could it be the actual second item for items for consideration on this? Well, it's over to Lucy, and it's land off Viggin Way, Coomfields, in my department.
Thank you, Chair. This application, R220861, is a full planning application for the erection of a unit for employment use under Class B2, which is in general industrial, with ancillary offices, car parking and landscaping. It is a major development and therefore, under the scheme of delegation, has been brought to committee. As you can see on the site location plan, this is the access from the main road network off the roundabout on Central Boulevard towards Viggin Way. This shows the application site, and if you can see from the pointer, I've just placed this blue box, or if you can see it at the top, sort of middle of the screen is where the proposed development is. The site is within Greenbelt, but is bounded by development on 3 sides. It is an allocated employment site of Ansty Park and is accessed directly from Viggin Way. The top left-hand photograph shows the Viggin Way with AVL on the right-hand side of the photograph. The second photograph, top right, is the car parking access to the AVL unit and where the proposed development would be. And the 2 bottom photographs are from the left and right of the bottom left is from Viggin Way, so showing across the site, and from the right hand side is at the very edge of the AVL site, and then looking towards IPG. Just some more site photographs. Top left is from, again, the AVL site. Top right is from Central Boulevard. So on the right hand side of that photograph is the Fanuc building, and then it's in the gap that the proposed development would be. And then the bottom photographs are from the public walkway that surrounds through the landscape buffer of the wider site. This is the proposed site section to show the proposed building in line with heights of the existing development. The site is located within the Zone 2 of the original parameters plan that was approved under the Ansty Park redevelopment in the outline consent in May 2009. In this zone, there was a total development area of over 33,000 square metres with over 1,000 car parking spaces. To date, within that zone, it has been occupied by Fanuc and AVL Technical Centre, and this has left a total of over 18,000 developable floor space area in Zone 2 and over 800 car parking spaces. Now, proposed tonight, there's 4,715 square metres of gross internal area with 105 car parking spaces. So whilst the outline planning application has now expired, the application proposal falls well within the original threshold for development in Zone 2 permitted by the outline consent. Here we have the proposed elevations. The first and second elevations show with the orange banding, and the glazing shows the elevations highlighting the offices that are proposed ancillary to the main unit. And the glazing, the different vertical banding of the elevations is used to break up the elevational expanse, and vertical banding is common use in the Ansty Park development. As previously stated, the application is within the Greenbelt. The application site is considered to be previously developed land. In reviewing against paragraph 149, we're looking at whether the proposed development would have an impact on openness in terms of the Greenbelt. As there's currently no development on the site, the introduction of the building would have an impact on openness, and therefore the development would be considered inappropriate in the Greenbelt, and this is given significant weight. In terms of other harm to the Greenbelt, there is the 5 purposes outlined in the framework. Some limited harm would arise in relation to checking the unrestricted sprawl of large built-up areas by virtue of infilling a limited open area within the wider site. The site also plays a moderate role in safeguarding the countryside from encroachment. The loss of this landed development would consequently give rise to some limited harm to this purpose. This is tempered by its limited connectivity to open countryside and its position. Based on the harm that has been identified, therefore, when looking at whether an application should be proposed, it needs to be established as to whether there's very special circumstances, which has been outlined in the report and will be discussed further later. Whilst the application site is within the Greenbelt, there is the long established status of the site as an employment site, as has been identified in previous local plans and in the current local plan. As stated, there is the principle of economic development at the site. Policy ED1 of the current local plan designates the site as an existing strategically significant employment site, and the redevelopment for B2 use as proposed is considered acceptable. Whilst there will be the intensification of development, this does help to meet our need for employment land. Through this proposal, we would see investment in the Borough and the wider region, with both direct, highly skilled jobs created and indirect jobs from the proposal. It also capitalises and builds on the success of the Ansty Business Park and Procedural Ansty. There would be construction jobs and businesses supported in those that would facilitate the unit. In terms of policy ED3, as the development is outside the urban area, as it is a located site, the application complies with this policy. Again, as the office development is ancillary to the main unit, this is in compliance with policy ED2 of the local plan. Moving on to highway safety, it is proposed that the unit will be accessed directly from Vigan Way from the forearm roundabout from the central boulevard, with the existing primary access already in place. In terms of our local plan parking standards in regards to general spaces, disabled spaces, electric charging provision and secure cycle parking, all of the standards of the local plan are met in that's proposed with this application. A transport statement has been submitted and assessed with the traffic flows considered with a negligible impact, with Warwickshire County Highways raising no objection subject to conditions. Since the agenda has been published, there has been the proposal for an additional informative to address the issue of staff travelling from either Coomfields Road, Peter Hall Lane or Smeaton Lane, and I have outlined on the screen that proposal. This is one that has been used in regards to other developments within this wider site, so that it would be consistent with that. In terms of landscaping, this has been reviewed by both our landscape officer and Warwickshire County Council Ecology. Now, it is acknowledged that the proposed development would be readily visible from the public footpath. However, it would not be seen in isolation and would rather be seen alongside the existing buildings on the Ansty Business Park. The proposed height of the unit conforms with those existing across the site, and it is therefore considered that the development would not have a greater impact. Other matters considered include noise, and it has been assessed by our environmental health, and to ensure both that the noise is acceptable and that there is none to any of the residents within the much wider area. There is the proposal for a noise survey or noise assessment, prior to above ground works as outlined in the conditions, and also one that relates specifically to reversing of vehicles. The lighting has been designed in line with the National Lighting Guidance and industry standards, and this has been considered acceptable by both our consultees of environmental health and Warwickshire County Council Ecology. Other matters considered, which have been addressed specifically more widely within my officer report, and no detrimental impacts that have been identified or outlined in this slide. Moving on to the planning balance, it is established that there would be the potential with the harm to the Greenbelt and should therefore not be approved except in very special circumstances. Therefore, looking at whether it can be considered sustainable development under the three threads of that, we have the economic benefits through the positive and direct impact on the regional and local economy. It supports the development of the site, including the Greenbelt and our employment land targets as outlined in policy DS1 of the local plan. Other economic developments would include safeguarding of construction jobs, associated indirect jobs, and businesses being supported. Moving on to social, from this aspect, by bringing the land into active economic use in line with the site allocation, this provides opportunity for new employment and job security, which could play a key role in helping improve and safeguard mental health and well-being. From an environmental perspective, the potential adverse impacts of the proposed development in relation to landscape, visual appearance, ecology, highway safety, traffic flows, flood risk, drainage, archaeology, air quality, noise, contamination, light and residential amenity have all been considered. The assessment has subsequently shown that there would be no adverse impacts in some instances. However, in other instances where potential adverse impacts are identified, it would be possible to mitigate against this through a number of different measures and strategies, which has been secured or could be secured through the conditions proposed in the draft decision that has been presented to the committee members. On balance, it is considered that the benefits of the proposed development are such that they clearly outweigh the harm identified to the Greenbelt, and therefore it is of the view that the proposed development would comply with the development plan, and no material considerations have been identified which indicate that the development should not be approved. And therefore the recommendation in front of the committee tonight is for approval of the planning application that would then be subject to referral to the planning casework unit with the conditions and informative set out in the draft decision noted appended to the report, including the additional informative that has been presented this evening. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you very much, Lucy, for that presentation. My initial concerns, although I'll support this type of development out in Ansty Park, my initial concerns were about traffic flows on our village roads and some form of light pollution that was raised by the local parish council. But that's all been addressed in the report, and I don't mind moving approval from the chair. Councillor Daly.
Just beat you to it. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's great to see condition 23 in there as well with the travel plan. It looks like an excellent investment in the Borough of Rugby yet again at Ansty Park. So I would happily second approval. Councillor Gillies, thank you.
Councillor Lawrence.
We did some training recently about biodiversity. And my question really on this, whether we have got enough strength in this to ensure that any replanting that's done is going to be biodiverse. We have a history that what planting is done is generally something that grows quickly and is not actually the type of planting we want. So I don't know whether we can get some informative to strengthen, I think it's condition 12, to strengthen that to actually try and encourage the developer to be more long-term in their thinking about biodiversity. That's one point I have. The second, this is Greenbelt, right? This is Greenbelt. We are near, again, a grade 1 building. There are only 2 in Rugby Borough. One happens to be in my ward. This is the other one, Coombe Abbey. We're not far away from that. It's called Coombe Fields, right? It gives it away in its name, right? So yes, this is allocated land, but we are taking Greenbelt. We are increasing the urban mass. So can we again put an informative in? I think I've mentioned this informative before about green construction methods, and could we add one in? And I'm happy to delegate to the officers in order to write that one. And I'd look around the other colleagues about the biodiversity one to see if that one's supported as well.
Thank you. Got any other speakers? No? All okay? Councillor Lawrence
So
again.
I would move to support this if those 2 informatives could be included.
With that, I'll amend my motion to move for approval. Okay with Councillor Daly to second that?
Yes, that's absolutely fine.
Brilliant. What I'd like to see with a lot of this tree planting is low maintenance, because it creates a lot of maintenance. It's the carbon footprint to that, low maintenance.
Chair, they always overplant in case they lose some.
Right, we're going to move to the vote, so That's been moved and seconded for approval. All those in favour, please show. And all those against? Any abstentions? Okay. We're going to move on to what was item number 6 on our items for determination, and that's going to be again presented by Lucy.
Yes, I need to declare a pecuniary interest in St Cross as my wife works there, so I will step out.
Okay, thank you, Chair. The next application is at the Hospital of St Cross, and this is for a 2-storey endoscopy facility complete with a new pedestrian crossing and hard landscaping on existing vacant land. Here we have both the site location within the blue line is the wider site of St Cross, and the red line boundary specific to where the new building is proposed, and then a more close-up view of that. Here we have the existing and proposed site plans. Currently the land is vacant as under a previous prior approval application, the demolition of the previous building on site was approved. Here you have some site photographs, and in terms of the principle of development, it is located within Rugby town, and therefore under policy GP2 of the local plan, the development is considered acceptable in principle. Also, great weight can be attributed to the proposal as it seeks to reuse the current site of the previously demolished building and implement the provision of a modern purpose-built facility. Currently the facilities of this unit are provided within the wider site, but this would provide a new purpose-built facility for the needs of the residents of Rugby. Consultee responses. Warwickshire County Council Ecology had no objection, subject to a biodiversity condition. Highways have no objection to the proposal, and subject to an acoustic survey. There's also no objection for our environmental services. Here we have the proposed elevations of the modern building that would be seen within the wider site of the hospital, and we've also been provided with a proposed CGI of the building. The proposed unit would provide a much needed purpose-built health facility for Rugby and further afield, without causing harm to the street scene, character of the area, nearby residential amenity, biodiversity or highway safety, and as such complies with all relevant plan policies and the underlying principles of the NPPF. Therefore, the application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions and informatives recommended.
Right, thank you very much for that, Lucy. We've got some speakers.
Thank you, Chair. One of my concerns is that I haven't actually got the conditions on this copy of the agenda. So if the officer could put the conditions up, it would be helpful. 33.
The number on the bottom of the page. What number is that? I can't see.
46.
Sorry?
That's 46.
I've got 33 you want.
33.
I've gone too far now.
That's 33.
I mean, whilst members are waiting, we have them on our internal system, so I can just mention to members what they are while officers are trying to find them. We have, our first condition is a standard time condition that goes on, obviously, most of our applications. The second one is then one in relation to the plans that are obviously part of the submission, so it's the elevations and the site location plan. The third one is then to do with details of materials. It to obviously make sure that they are tying with the plans that are submitted. The fourth one is actually requesting a combined ecological and landscaping scheme shall be submitted to and agreed with us as officers. The fourth one is again a condition, again relating to ecology and ensuring that that the work is timetabled as not to avoid, trying to avoid the bird breeding season and to prevent possible disturbance to nesting birds. But also if that does have to happen between March and September, then actually mitigation is put in place and ecologists are aware of what's actually happening. The next condition relates to actually installation of bird boxes on the site, and again details being submitted to us. I think, have you got there yet? Okay.
Yes, so as was pointed out, condition 6 related to the provision of a minimum of 3 bird boxes. Condition 7 relates to part of the installation of air source heat pumps or any other external plant. A noise assessment shall be undertaken. Condition 8 is prior to the commencement of above groundworks, a construction management plan shall be submitted and approved by the local planning authority. And then we have the R's informative and other ecological informatives proposed.
Yeah, can I thank the officer for that? My concern was in the report, it states there's going to be a loss of, 18 parking spaces on the site. But there doesn't seem to be a recommendation for a travel plan, for example, or an informative to encourage the applicant to look for other modes of transport, for example. There is a lot of people use that back route as a cycle route. A lot of the staff do, as do the school up to the free school. They use that route as a route for cycle, walk, or disability to make use of the services on St Cross or slightly further afield. Certainly at the moment, open spaces, Sustrans, and cycle transport are looking at linking a route up from the sports centre to the hospital. So I'm a bit concerned that, you're going to lose parking spaces there, which will mean the site will be becoming more crowded, but there's no proposal to encourage people to use other modes of transport. And that could be cycling, that could be disability, it could be using the bus. There's nothing on there, on this application, that covers that. So I'm asking the officer whether there could possibly be an informative to encourage the use of other modes of transport to make up for the loss of parking.
Through Chair, yes, through the recommendation that it does include the opportunity for councillors to provide officers the authority, and we could make that amendment prior to any decision being issued.
Thank you, that would be really helpful.
Okay, we've got any further speakers? Councillor Eccleston.
Just for clarification and to pick up on Councillor Sanderson's point there, these parking spaces, you mentioned that there'd been a previous building on the site which had been demolished. Are these parking spaces temporary parking spaces that are on the previous site, or are these permanent parking spaces? It's simply to ascertain whether these were temporary parking spaces put on the site previously occupied by whatever building was there.
Yeah, sorry, I've just lost the plan that was in front of me, because it will help me to clarify. 2 seconds. Yeah, I believe through looking at what's existing on the site, they are permanent spaces, because the building will be larger, the footprint, so therefore it's existing spaces that would have been there for much longer. It's not just from the demolition of the previous site.
Okay, we've got further speakers. I tend to think this is a most useful facility for rugby and the surrounding area, and I'd like to move approval from the chair. With that additional informative.
I'd be happy to second that, Chair, with that amendment.
Okay, we've got Councillor Bill Lewis. He's done it. Okay. Okay, so we've got a mover and seconder with that additional informative. All those in favour, please show. Well, that's unanimous. The first time tonight. Great. Right, we've got Sam next with Brinklow Marina, Cathine Lane, Brinklow, actually in the parish of Arbor Magna, just to confuse you.
Thank you, Chair. This is application R221037 at Brinklow Marina, Cathine Lane, Brinklow, for the major application for the proposed change of use of 30 existing leisure moorings to residential moorings, use class sui generis. This will provide a total of 40 residential stations within the site and 160 leisure moorings. So this application has been reported to Planning Committee in accordance with paragraph 5.22c, major developments of the scheme of delegation. So in terms of the site location and characteristics, the site is located approximately 2 miles to the west of Brinklow. The centre of Rugby is about 4 miles to the southeast, and Coventry is 5 miles to the west. The marina features 200 berths, which provides access to the Oxford Canal to the east of the site. The site itself was established in 2003. Aquavista Watersides and Marinas Limited are now the freehold owners of the site. The site is located on land characterised as the Rugby Coventry Green Belt, and there is vehicular access which enters from Cathine Lane, which is classed as a D road. On the northern boundary, there is an area of hard-standing wasteland which is currently used as an informal car park and houses the reception security building. So, characteristics continued. The site contains the existing infrastructure as listed on the slideshow. So there's reception, toilet and showering building, which is timber built and can be seen on the bottom left photo. And around this area, there's an area of hard standing for informal parking provision, which is to the north of the site, which can be seen to the photo to the right of that. There is existing waste disposal and recycling and a collection area, which can be seen on the two right photos. There is storage provision for each resident, and there is informal parking areas adjacent to each mooring station. So you can see site photos here. On the top row in the middle, you've got the canal entrance from the Oxford Canal. Top right, you've got the vehicular entrance from Cathine Lane. You can see the evidence of the informal parking provision next to each mooring station. And then the bottom right, you have the view of the site southwards towards King's Newnham. So in terms of a definition between a leisure mooring and a full-time residential occupier, this definition of leisure mooring has been provided by Aquavista. It is acknowledged that leisure mooring can be different on a site-by-site basis. Each site and each owner can have different rules for such. However, in terms of Brinklow, the following has been provided, and that is leisure users are subject to an annual mooring contract and as an on-site rule should not be staying on their boats for any more than 3 nights in a given week. In order to be eligible for a leisure mooring, they must have a separate postal address and proof of a primary residence for a year before any contract can be issued. So therefore, subsequently, a full-time residential occupier can be defined as an occupier which lives there full-time and receives a postal address and has to pay council tax. So in terms of the proposal details, as previously mentioned, the proposal is for the change of use of 30 existing leisure moorings to residential moorings. This will take the total residential units on the site to 40 out of the 200 stations. The remaining 160 will remain in a leisure use. The scheme proposes to maintain the flexibility of the location of these residential moorings across the Marina Basin. Aside from this application, there was an application on the site in 2021 which gained the approval for the erection of a timber structure to provide additional showering and toilet facilities to the occupiers of the site. This is not directly included within this application. However, should permission be granted tonight, a glamping-style condition shall be imposed to ensure that these works are carried out prior to the first occupation of any residential unit proposed. So in terms of this application as well, there is proposed for storage and postal boxes for each residential unit, formalisation of parking on the northern boundary, which is currently informal, and electric charging stations to facilitate this. So in terms of the proposal details as well, the top left you have the evidence of the formal parking on the northern boundary. This will create 64 formal parking spaces surrounding the existing reception area. Bottom left you have the postal boxes which will be provided, and then to the right of that you have the proposed storage boxes for each unit as well. So in terms of the consultation responses, Ecology Department offered no objection, Canal and Rivers Trust no objection, Highways offered no objection, Flood Risk no objection, Environmental Health no objection, Work Services no comment, and the infrastructure team at Warwickshire County Council also offered no objection. In terms of third-party responses, it was stated that a robust planting scheme of mature and semi-mature trees are put in place to provide screening and reduce light pollution from the Greenbelt site. Harbour and Magna Council also stated that they had concerns over the traffic increase to the surrounding villages and the increase in extra service vehicles to the site, and that there was already issues with Tuckley's Bridge in the vicinity and that the proposal could exacerbate this further. King's Newnham Parish also had no objection. So in terms of the key considerations, so the principle of development, as previously stated, the marina is located outside of the confines of the settlement boundary of Brinklow and within the Rugby Coventry Green Belt. Therefore, is situated at the bottom of the sequential test for development as stated in Local Plan Policy GP2. This policy states that new development in the Green Belt will be resisted only where national policy allows it to be permitted. In terms of national policy then, Section 13, paragraph 147 states that inappropriate development is by definition harmful to the green belt and should not be approved except in very special circumstances. However, paragraph 150E outlines that material changes of use of the land are acceptable, subject to the change preserving the openness of the land contained within the site. In conjunction with this, paragraph 84A specifically recommends that in promoting a strong rural economy, planning policies should enable the sustainable growth and expansion of all types of rural business. So in terms of the assessment against these policies, the proposed change of use will not materially impact on the openness of the surrounding greenbelt land to that already resulting from the existing uses. However, whilst the occupancy rates may be higher at certain periods of the year, the principle for the change of use is established. The Marina is also considered a site for rural tourism in the borough, with a canal network a part of the rural economy. Therefore, minor incidental development in order to promote the viability of the site should be supported, subject to the greenbelt being preserved. Therefore, this application is considered to be in accordance with policy GP1, GP2, NE3 of the local plan and section 2 and 13 of the framework. In terms of character design, all proposed are considered to be minor additions within the confines of the site. The formalisation of the new hard surfacing of the northern boundary will be conditioned as stated in condition 3, where more details and specification of the materials used in this aspect will be given to the local authority prior to commencement of the works and agreed. On assessment, this proposal will not have an adverse impact on the visual amenities of the surrounding area whilst providing the required infrastructure and provision in order to fulfil the proposed change of use. Therefore, is in accordance with SDC 1 and section 12 of the MPPF. In terms of impact on residential amenity, due to the nature of the development and the open characteristics of the wider locality, there are considered to be no adverse impacts which will be generated on the amenity of the surrounding area to that already experienced. Existing noise and light levels are not considered to be adversely impacted by the scheme as per Environmental Health Department's advice. Therefore, this aspect of the application is in accordance with SDC 1 and section 12 of the MPPF. In terms of pollution, local plan policy HS5 is relevant. This states that proposals should take full account of the cumulative impact of all developments, including that proposed in this local plan on traffic, generation, air quality, noise and vibration. As previously stated, Environmental Health have assessed the application and have no objections subject to informatives. Their assessment stated that noise as a result of the proposal is not considered adverse to that existing and no additional lighting is proposed. In terms of air quality, the development would result in a reduction of cruising along the canal as the residential moorings allow for permanent occupation. However, electric charging points have been provided which will mitigate any potential issues. Therefore, the development will have no adverse impacts in terms of pollution and therefore complies with paragraph 174 of the framework and local plan policy HS5. In terms of highway safety, section 9 paragraph 111 of the MPPF states that development should only be prevented or refused on the highway grounds if there will be unacceptable impact on highway safety or the cumulative impacts on the road network will be severe. There is no new access proposed, only the existing will be slightly intensified as a result of the proposal. Warwickshire CC Highways Department have also offered a stance of no objection. So in terms of the parking provision proposed, as mentioned, the vehicular access will remain as existing. The parking provision proposed can be broken down into the following. So on the northern part of the site, 64 spaces are proposed. On the southern boundary, there are existing informal space for 20 cars, and then there is informal parking adjacent to each mooring station. As residential mooring units are classified as sui generis, in accordance with the local plan, the provision will be assessed on its own merits. The transport statement submitted as part of the proposal also states that the development may generate 8 or 9 additional two-way vehicle movements in both AM and PM peaks and a total of 120 two-way vehicle movements in a 24-hour period. Therefore, the parking provision proposed is considered to be in accordance with local plan policy D1 and the adverse impacts. There are considered to be no adverse impacts on the highway network as a result of the proposal. So in terms of biodiversity, policy NE3 states that new development which positively contributes to landscape character will be permitted. As previously mentioned, ecology offered no objection and no mitigation comments were made. This is due to no additional lighting, buildings or hard standing being proposed beyond what are already approved in previous applications on the site. In terms of flooding, the Marina Basin is located in an area designated as Flood Zone 1, this indicating a low risk of flooding from fluvial and tidal sources. The proposed residential moorings are considered to be water-compatible development type, and development of this type is considered appropriate in all flood zones. The Flood Risk Authority also provided a stance of no objection. Therefore, this aspect of the application is in accordance with Local Plan Policy SDC 5. So, other matters, it's been stated that waste collection and storage will remain as current. The photos were shown of the existing waste storage collection system on the site. So no additional large commercial or refuse collection vehicles will be visiting the site on a day-to-day basis, and everything will remain as existing. In terms of demands, the applicants have provided details that at present the existing 10 residential moorings are fully occupied, and that 145 leisure moorings are subject to long-term contracts. This therefore means that there are currently 45 leisure moorings vacant or available to let within the site. This then provides an overall occupancy rate of the site at the moment of 82.5%. They've also stated that there are potentially 50 interested parties wishing to make the residential mooring out of these 30 their home in the future. So moving on to the planning balance and conclusion. The proposal is considered a suitable change of use with small-scale development which is appropriate to the proposal. The impact on the surrounding green belt is negligible. Policy GP2 in paragraph 149B and 150E of the framework is therefore complied with. There are considered to be no adverse impacts on biodiversity and no additional lighting is proposed. The application is therefore in accordance with local plan policies NE1, NE3, along with section 15 of the framework. The environmental benefits are given significant weight. In terms of highways, the vehicle access is existing and highways have no objection to any level of intensification resulting from the scheme. The applicant has also provided data which indicates the level of additional car movements which is considered acceptable. The proposal would also result in a contribution to the viability of local retail uses and services. Such matters would have a positive impact on the local economy and prosperity of the borough, which weighs in favour of the application. The scheme will provide an increase in the number of households to the area, providing a benefit to the community and the viability to the site. This is considered appropriate in order to meet the increasing demand for residential moorings across the UK. And finally, the development would result in sustainable development and is therefore recommended for approval. Significant weight is also placed on the need to support economic growth and productivity in accordance with paragraph 81 of the MPPF. Therefore, the recommendation is approval subject to the conditions and informatives as set out in the draft decision notice appended to the report. Thank you.
Right, thanks for that, Sam. Have we got any questions for the officer, or do you want to go straight into debate? Councillor Eccleston, then Councillor Lawrence.
In terms of the site at the moment, I'm sorry, I probably missed the point. How much vehicular traffic did you say was there currently? Current vehicle movements?
Details on current vehicle movements haven't been provided, only that proposed. However, the Cathine Lane is a fairly quiet highway. Having done several site visits to the site, me personally, there was no major issues with highways in terms of car movements. The site, I think it said in the final slide as well, there was 80% occupancy, and there appeared to be a car associated with most of the units as well. So there are a lot of cars in the site, but in terms of the surrounding highway network.
Okay, thank you. I was thinking of the objection raised by Harbour Magna Parish Council about the danger of the junction there, and I thought, well, I wonder how many cars are using it now.
Yeah, okay.
Councillor Lawrence.
I have two questions for clarification. One is really just about the numbers. We're talking about 40 residents and 64 car parking spaces. So this being a rural area, everybody will need a car. That leaves 24, potentially less, car parking spaces. And then there are a bit of variation in number here. Either 145 or 160 leisure moorings to use 24 car parking spaces. Is that correct analysis?
So yeah, as mentioned in the presentation, the proposal aims to provide 64 formal car parking spaces in the northern boundary. However, there is space around the basin. I can get the site plan up. So where you see all the individual units on the access road surrounding the basin, there's space for cars to park next to each unit. So in theory, there'll be the 64 proposed, and there's space next to informal parking, admittedly, but space next to each of the individual mooring basins. So when I did the site visit, it appeared that most of the occupiers did park next to their own mooring space anyway. However, this proposal seeks to add 64 additional formal spaces on top of that as well. So in terms of the parking, there should be sufficient across the whole site.
Okay, so as I understand it, therefore the 64 is really for the people who will be visiting, probably not.
Yeah, well, they have stated as well that each of the full-time residential occupiers will have a space given to them out of the 64. However, they will have that, and then there's the informal space around the basin as well to park.
Okay. It does feel as if parking might not be quite sufficient, but I'll leave it to your judgment on this. My second one really is about the rural economy. I assume, but I don't know, you can correct me, that this may have been given planning permission in the first place for rural tourism. Okay, now so we're converting for something from rural tourism to residential. It's the rural tourism bit that creates the economy. It's the fact that people who don't come from the area, who are using these lettings on short term, are you going to restaurants, pubs, whatever. So I would have thought this is actually a negative impact on the rural economy rather than a positive one. Have you got any comment on that?
Yeah, it's a valid point. I think if there was more residential units proposed in this application, you know, it might have been brought up more detail in the officer report. However, with there still being 160 leisure moorings still on site, if this was approved today, then I think personally it was considered that the impact on the rural tourism wouldn't be noticeable as such, especially the fact as well that the occupancy rate stated that there was 45 vacant units at the moment. So in theory, the leisure uses at current will remain the same, and then the residential will be added on top of that as such.
Thank you for the clarification.
Councillor Lewis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a bit of information, really. If this is passed tonight, then the leisure moorings will become residential. Does that mean they can be classed as affordable dwellings?
I'm not too sure on that. I'm not sure if anyone could clarify. I don't think that's the case, no. I think because they're classed as sui generis, in terms of use class, they're on their own individual merit.
Through you, Chair, the units that would be approved, as stated by Sam, would be considered sui generis. So that's the wider category, whereas to be affordable housing, it would need to be a residential use, such as C3 that we have. If it's a dwelling house, it's due to how the planning use classes are divided. The specific one, with them falling under sui generis, doesn't fit within the category that we can then require affordable housing.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Silverstava.
Transport, access.
Through you, Chair. So in terms of the site, it is sort of isolated as such. There is no public transport in close proximity, but as stated, because this is classed as sui generis, it is very much assessed on its own merit, and I think this form of living is very unique. Obviously, if you do live full-time in one of these boats, you are going to have a car as well that is accepted. However, the use of public transport, it's hard to assess as such because it is so unique. So therefore, yeah, I would suggest that no public transport would be used, but it's a very unique situation in terms of a residential house.
Thank you.
Any further speakers? We need at least 2 speakers to. My only concern is that the entrances are actually on All Oaks Lane, and it does lead to a junction with Cathine Lane, and that junction is very dangerous where the road goes over the canal bridge. I'm very familiar with those roads. I've spent all my childhood around there fishing in the canal close by. But that's my only concern on this. Otherwise, I've got no problems about moving this for approval from the chair again. Yes, we're in debate now. Please go forward. Yeah, yeah. No, please move forward into debate.
Okay.
Go ahead, Councillor.
I declare quite a lot of knowledge of canal dwellers because I work a lot for the Canals and Rivers Trust as well. And rather cynically, I would say that the 45 leisure moorings that are on that site, they're probably residential anyway now because they probably just move out and move to another berth, and they just keep moving from one to the other every 3 days, if they even bother. I think in terms of the benefit to us as a council, to get the council tax from these people is great because a lot of canal dwellers actually like to claim they don't pay council tax because they keep moving around. So I think that's really good for us as a borough council. I think in terms of the leisure moorings there, I think that a lot of the people obviously only visit and they don't bring cars with them anyway, so that's very often not an issue. They'll just stop there, they'll get an Uber or whatever they need to get, or they'll just sit on their boats and eat and cook and drink and just enjoy the countryside. So that's the rural community issue. So from with that in respect and the fact it's an established site, and that I'd happily second the chair's move for approval.
Have we got any other speakers? Or Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. And I think we know that in the housing market, certainly for young couples, it's becoming almost impossible to buy a house these days because either the price of the house or they can't get the deposit. So we're seeing more young people actually moving into residential moorings as a permanent solution to their housing problems. So I have no hesitation to, I'll happily support the application.
Okay, we've got no further speakers. We've had a proposer and a seconder for approval. All those in favour, please show. And that's unanimous again. We're now going to be moving on to Bilton Grange with Ruth. This is application number R22/1145. Right, we've just been requested to have a short toilet break, so we can do that. And actually, the number I read out was the incorrect number because I haven't been to Specsavers yet. You see, so it's actually R22/1144. Right, welcome back to part two. Just to reintroduce Ruth, the officer is going to present R22/1144, Bilton Grange.
Good evening. This application is being reported to the Planning Committee in accordance with the scheme of delegation because the proposed development falls within the definition of a major development. It's for the erection of a new accommodation block for 80 student boarders, including 5 residential units for supporting staff and associated ancillary spaces. The new accommodation is required in order for the school to meet the requirements of the national minimum standards for boarding. This has become increasingly difficult for the school to achieve the required standard given the historic fabric of the school. Sorry, I'm having a problem with my mouse. There we go. I think I've got it back now. There we go. So this has become increasingly difficult to achieve given the constraints of the historic building fabric, and the options for upgrading the existing accommodation are expensive and limited. That's better. The plan to the left shows the extent of Bilton Grange School, and the enlargement to the right shows the chosen location of the new building in relation to this. The principal building is Grade 2 star listed, and the site includes 3 lodges, a gardener's cottage and walls, and gate piers, which all have Grade 2 listing designation. The whole of the site sits within 90 acres of Grade 2 listed parkland, comprising 11 hectares of gardens and 39 hectares of parkland. It's recognised that the requirement for a substantial building potentially carries a significant impact for the heritage assets wherever it is placed. This application has been subject to a pre-application process which undertook a detailed master plan analysis of the site, considering all of the parkland and listed buildings. The pre-application information has been included with the planning application. The plan here shows the extent of the historic parkland, which identifies 2 distinct categories. A central area is comprised of the main historic buildings and modern developments, including a car park and maintenance buildings. The second category is that of fringe development that is comprised of small developments all around the edges of the park, which is divided into the 4 areas shown and outlined in blue. The preferred location for the new building is within the central area 4, located to the northeast of the Ravenscroft Theatre and behind the car park and maintenance building yard. It is a gently sloping site that's set down from the main central area, and visually its impact would be mainly towards Area 3, largely used for farming, with a lesser impact on Area 2, laid out for sports use. It would keep it away from the old gardens of the Manor House, with the Victorian Wall Garden in Area 1. These computer-generated images show the layout of the school, labelling the development over the years from an education block built in the early 20th century, the Ravenscroft Theatre in 1961, through to the extension of the music school in 2018-19. The more modern developments have been located to the northwest and southeast of the central historic school buildings. The proposed accommodation building is shown in the lower image, close to the Ravenscroft Theatre. The location has been selected to minimise potential impacts upon the listed buildings to the centre. Site photographs from the officer site visit. To the left is a view of the eastern elevation of the Ravenscroft Theatre. The centre photograph shows the view looking north past that elevation towards the location of the new building. The photograph on the right is showing the view towards the location from the maintenance yard. And in the centre photograph you can see how the land is sloping down and away at this point. The application includes a new access road to give access to the building here. It will go past the existing maintenance yard, and the new building will be framed by the more modern development of the school to the southeastern end, so Ravenscroft Theatre and the adjacent modern building block indicated by these arrows. The design would be centred around a courtyard and set down within its location, with accommodation arranged over 4 floors. The partial lower ground floor would be built into the topography of the site and provide the main refectory area and kitchen facilities for the building, along with a hub space which is designed to have a multifunction use. The slide shows the lower and upper ground floors and the roof with garden areas and solar panel array. Just wondering if I can enlarge this a bit. If you look here, there's a circular staircase provides access to all the floors, and just a fun point that there is a slide around the outside of this to give the children a fun alternative way to access lower accommodation. I understand this has been incorporated into one of their buildings in Japan. It's been a huge hit. So,
site visit coming up.
The elevations show the land level falling away to the southeast. The main elevations fronting towards the school will be of the 3-storey elements, with a 4-storey elevation positioned the furthest away from the school buildings. These drawings show the new building within the context of the existing school buildings and clearly demonstrates the subordinate relationship the new building will have to the rest of the school. So key issues: principle of development, character design and location, and impact upon the heritage assets, impact upon neighbouring properties, highways and planning obligations. The principle of development. The site is located within the countryside. Policy GB2 states for developments within the countryside that new development will be resisted. Only where national policy on countryside locations allows will it be permitted. The application site is located within the parish of Dunchurch, but not within the village boundary. However, as the development will be within the existing curtilage of Bilton Grange School, which is an already developed site, the proposals are considered acceptable and to comply with Policy GP2. The Town and Country Listed Building and Conservation Area Act requires us to have special interest to preserving the listed buildings and their settings. Similarly, Policy SDC3 of the local plan supports development that sustains and enhances the significance of the borough's heritage assets. Subject to this and the proposed scheme complying with national and local policies, the principle of development is considered acceptable. The application site has been subject to a master planning process, and effective use has been made of the land's natural topography, setting the building down to keep it subordinate to the existing school. By keeping the building within the central area, the building would be easily accessible to the boarding students at the end of their school day and prevents unnecessary intrusion into the listed parkland. The preferred design proposes a building that is set slightly remotely from the existing buildings and connects to its environment through the landscaping and views. This approach is welcomed and helps to distinguish the new accommodation facility from the academic buildings, providing a recognisable separation between work and home for the student boarders and the support staff. The building is intended to be highly sustainable, with roof gardens and solar panel array. The scheme employs an energy hierarchy and follows a passive and efficiency improvements. The energy report states that the proposed scheme is expected to be net zero carbon with an anticipated EPC rating of A+. A separate consultation has been undertaken with Historic England, and the application is supported by a full heritage report and heritage impact assessment. Historic England have not objected to the scheme, and there is an accompanying application for listed building consent. The chosen materials have been carefully considered in line with advice from Historic England. The design of the new building is intended to be low-key. The outward-facing elevations are proposed to be in buff brick and a similar coloured stone. The choice is a careful reflection of Pugin's already relative pale brickwork. Overall, the proposals have a very small impact on Bilton Grange and its setting, and this impact has been mitigated through the design, location and choice of materials. Residential amenities. There are no close proximity neighbours to the new building. The proposed scheme does not give rise to any amenity concerns over and above the use of the existing site. The building will have lights on during the evening, but there are no neighbours near to the building that could be disturbed by artificial lights at night. In terms of highways, WCC Highways have been consulted as part of the process and have not objected to the scheme. The proposed accommodation will be to replace existing accommodation for the boarders, whilst the current accommodation will be converted to teaching classrooms, providing additional educational space. Whilst it's recognised there might potentially be a small increase to traffic impacts from the proposals, these would not be significant. WCC Ecology have requested a construction environmental management plan to ensure that protected species are not harmed by the development, and this has been conditioned. And in terms of planning obligations, consultations with statutory consultees have not resulted in any requests for contributions. As such, the application is considered acceptable and it's recommended for approval subject to the conditions set out in the report. Thank you.
Right. And what a historic building and its setting. I'm sure we've got some questions to ask. We've got Councillor Lawrence.
Two questions I have. One is, you mentioned it'll be low impact on traffic, but we are talking about, I'll have to guess at the figures, I think it's about a third of the school getting larger or something like that. The borders may be weekly, it's not necessary, they're locked away for 3 months, and there will be more staff, more cleaners, whatever. The issue therefore is actually at the entrance of that school, where there is an existing problem by people going in and out of that school because it blocks the road. We have obviously got the new road going in, the Relief Road around Dunchurch. I don't know what your view is, whether there is any combined effect or you believe that it is so light the impact on that. My first question. The second one is about condition 3, which is about the colour, finish and texture of the building. I don't think we've seen any pictures which really tell us what it's going to look like in that data and how it blends. But I think that condition is there. But my problem is, who is it that makes the decision on whether it is the right colour, finish and texture? Who's that been delegated to make that decision?
Thank you. In terms of your first question relating to traffic, this is a replacement. It's not an additional accommodation facility. So the students currently occupy the upper floors of the Grade 2 Star listed building, and there are about 80 boarders, and this accommodation is for 80 boarders. It is also going to provide additional accommodation for some support staff that is currently dotted around the site. So there's no, highways have been consulted, they haven't objected. In terms of the school enlarging its capacity, that's not forming part of this application. In terms of the second question in regard to the colour and the materials, if you just bear with me, the elevations are showing a computer-generated image of what that's going to be like. The application and the information online includes a document of material iterations that were considered. This was undertaken with Historic England. The original building itself actually has a variety of different brick colours within it. And as stated in the report, the intention is to make this building low-key and to make it soft and a not in your face development that's going to try and compete with a listed building. The idea is that's why it's been chosen to be set down. It's going to be lower in the site. Its visibility is not going to be great. I will be presenting the listed building consent after this one. We'll talk about the views a bit more in that. So yes, and as I say, these materials have been chosen in consultation with Historic England, who are happy with what's been chosen. The condition does require samples to be submitted and the details will be firmed up, and I will consult with Historic England again on that when those come in.
Thank you for your report and your clarifications. Thank you.
Councillor Lewis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ruth, for the report. It's very full, thank you. My question it follows on from Councillor Lawrence, really. It's about the junction with the drive and with Rugby Road. The traffic along the Rugby Road is going to increase in the next few years as Ashland Gardens gets completed, and also a new primary school on National Fields. So I have the Highways Authority indicated that they've taken that into consideration. And also there's a period, it's quite a large building, so there'll be a lot of construction traffic going in and out. I know that's only temporary, but it could lead to problems there as well. So has that been addressed? Thank you.
I don't believe that Highways have taken those other sites that you mentioned into consideration as part of this one, but they're not required to. They will only look at the impact that's created from the development that they're being consulted on. They're not here to specifically ask. In regard to the concern over construction traffic, there is a condition for a construction management plan with the application, so that will be a pre-commencement condition and be consulted on again with the relevant consultees to ensure that all of those matters are considered.
Yeah, I would have thought with regard to the road conditions, they need to take into account what the existing road conditions are as the project goes on.
Well, Highways will have all the data for the junction, and they will have looked at that, and they will have considered the potential impacts. But I understand that the other developments are also coming forward. As you say, it will evolve over time. I don't know a lot about the Ashland Road development, in fairness, but I imagine that will have some Highways considerations going on with that. The impacts from that will have been fully considered by Highways at the time of that application.
Got Richard to chip in there.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think Ruth did actually partly answer the question that I was going to mention, actually respond to, was that Highways don't sort of work within the silo. They are aware of obviously future schemes coming forward, such as a lot of the development in Rugby South West. So they will be aware of that when they're commenting on major applications such as this. Because sometimes they may request that additional mitigation is put in because of the volume of traffic that may be being generated by a particular major development before other big schemes come through. Just to clarify that, they're not completely unaware of other big schemes coming through, and I know they do have a team that do look at things like modelling, and that's constantly being reviewed when other sort of major applications come through. So this would be, when commenting on this, they would be aware of other aspects.
Councillor Eccleston.
If I may offer some clarification as well to Councillor Lewis's question from previous experience on the parish council at Dunchurch. Some years ago, the parish council, with the school, actually offered to fund some traffic lights at that junction at the entrance, part-time traffic lights. And that was turned down by Warwickshire County Council on the basis that the Spine Road was going to be built, which would ultimately be cutting across Northampton Lane and actually be removing some of the through traffic from the Rugby Road through Dunchurch. So that was refused by Warwickshire County Council on that basis. Coming to my question now. My question is, I noticed that the new building, and I have to say it, the design looks particularly attractive, far more attractive than the gym that was built there and the swimming pool that was built there, which are flat-roofed, horrible buildings. But it looks quite nice. But you mentioned a new access road to it. Isn't there already an access road that goes around to those maintenance, that maintenance area? So that is that an improvement of the existing access road, or an extension of it, or what is it?
Yes, it's a continuation of it. So it's been put there to avoid it, intruding onto there's some gate pillars that are grade 2 listed at the top of there. And so it will come off that, and it'll be a continuation down towards the new building. And there'll be a little bit of parking as well, just a few extra spaces for those that are going to be living, the support staff that will be living there as well.
We've got no more questions, so we move into debate. Again, I don't mind approving this from the chair because we, both me and the Vice Chairman, have a briefing on the Monday. So we've already had a good feel for this already and thought it over in our minds. So I'm no problem with about moving for approval on this.
Happy to second, Chair.
Since we're in debate now, the school, apart from those two horrible newish buildings that they've got in there, they've got a reputation recently for some really good work. I mean, they spent a lot of money on the wall gardens, renovating the wall gardens, which is a Grade 2 listed wall garden there as well. And I think what's proposed is certainly, especially since it's got Heritage England's seal of approval as well, I think is very good, and I have no problem supporting the motion for approval.
Have we got any other speakers on this? Okay, so it's been moved and seconded for approval. All those in favour, please show. And once again, speaking as one voice. Brilliant. Right, we've got Ruth again. And this time, let's get the number right this time. So this one is R22/1145.
I'll try not to repeat too much from my previous presentation. This one is come to committee because it is the supporting application for the one we've just been discussing, the full major application 1144. This is for listed building consent for the accommodation block, but also for minor demolitions and reconfiguration of internal spaces to Grade 2 and Grade 2 star listed school buildings, which is going to provide additional classrooms and educational facilities. I'd just say that these alterations weren't included in the planning permission because planning isn't required for them. They're minor interventions, and so they just need the listed building consent. So here we are, here's the plan again with the site and where the new building will be going within that. The blowout picture here on the right, the buildings in pink, showing what are the original listed buildings, and then the other later additions are all shown in pale orange. So the application for listed building consent, as stated, includes both the new accommodation block and the alterations to the Grade 2 star listed school buildings. Given that the application for the full planning permission has provided an extensive assessment of the impacts of the new building, this one's going to concentrate primarily on the interventions to the Grade 2 star building. So we've got some site photographs here that showing the outside of the original building. The other two photographs are showing a typical dormitory room, as is at the moment, and a washroom facility that currently the boarding students use. So the works to the listed building have been arranged in zones. The purple areas shown on these drawings show the areas of alteration and refurbishment, and the areas in pink show where minor refurbishment works are to take place. All of the original buildings are coloured in brown, and the other colours just relate, so the orange is Ravenscross Theatre, so they all relate to more recent modern additions. So this one is Zone 1, the ground floor proposed works. The main works are existing classrooms, lounge and offices to be converted into changing rooms with showers and toilets. The minor refurbishment works are a school shop to become a medical facility, dining room and lounge and breakfast areas to become staff room, workroom and kitchen changing areas. So that's up around here and down here. Zones 2, 3 and 4 are all on the first floor. The main works are existing bedrooms and a room called the chalet to become changing rooms, showers and toilets. In Zone 3, the main works are the existing dormitory and offices to be converted to classrooms and offices. For Zone 4, the main works are existing toilets and washroom to be converted into a teaching classroom. That's here. The first floor minor refurbishment works are the pink areas, refurbishment of toilets and change dormitories to classrooms and change bedrooms to offices. And then Zone 5 for the second floor, the main works in purple here are existing dormitories and showers to be converted to gap year accommodation with en-suites. And the second floor minor refurbishment works in pink, changing dormitories to bedrooms and refurbishing washrooms, changing a sitting room to a kitchen. So the key issues for the listed building consent are the principle of works and the impact upon Bilton Grange. So this proposal has been subject to an evaluation of the impact upon the significance of Bilton Grange and whether the works would serve to preserve or enhance the listed building and its setting. The heritage significance of Bilton Grange includes the principal building, 3 lodges, a gardener's cottage and walls, gate piers and the surrounding park and garden. Bilton Grange derives its significance through its historical associations with Pugin and the previous owners that established and expanded this gentleman's estate. The completeness of the works remains broadly intact and aids the understanding of their heritage significance by pupils, staff, visitors and the broader community. The Heritage Impact Assessment includes an appraisal of the proposed works to the Grade 2 star listed building. It states that the majority of works within the historic building are to return previously divided historic spaces to their original size. This involves the removal of modern partition walls and WC facilities associated with the use of these rooms as dormitories. The works will reverse the erosion of these rooms' historic spatial qualities and enhance the building's significance. Some parts of the building subject to the changes have already been altered to serve the needs of the school, and these further alterations will reflect the changing pattern of educational use. Historic England has stated that the internal proposals are unobjectionable, given that they're alterations to relatively recent insertions. Any alterations to historic fabric involves a very minor degree of change. This now to move on to the new building once again. The selected location for it would not be significant in the historic use of the site, either as a school or previous country house. It would not have intervisibility with the existing historic building. There would instead be intervisibility with the 20th century theatre block. So our building is here, the theatre block is here. Although views out from within this are limited. Accordingly, the Heritage Impact Assessment concludes the impact to these limited views is considered to be neutral. Views from the currently unused Northern Drive would be unaffected, that's here. The new building would sit beyond the existing modern service buildings here, which are screened from view by tree belts. The proposed building would not be visible from the formal gardens to the southwest of the house, over here. When approaching from the western drive, the new building would be visible in glimpsed views through tree belts when walking into the reception entrance of the principal building. As such, it's not considered that views of the new contemporary building would detract from the experience when arriving at Bilton Grange. There would be no direct connection of the accommodation block with the existing building, and so no disturbance of fabric, historic or modern, would be required. So as such, and subject to relevant conditions, it's considered that the significance of the listed building and its setting is preserved, and it's recommended that listed building consent be granted.
Right, we move over to questions. Questions for Ruth on the listed building consent? Or do you want to move straight into debate? Or okay, let's move into debate then. Any speakers? I think from my perspective, it's all pretty straightforward. I know whatever work's going to be done, it's going to be done to the highest standard because that's the sort of people they are. And again, I don't mind a moving approval from the chair. And a seconder from...
Absolutely, Chair. We had a very helpful presentation. Thank you, Ruth, on Monday. It's As far as I'm concerned, I can't speak for others, a top drawer application, top drawer report. Thank you.
Right, we've got no further speakers. It's been proposed and seconded for approval. All those in favour, please show. Yeah, this is getting popular, isn't it? All, yeah, isn't it? Right, that brings the applications for consideration to a close, and then we move on to item 5 on the agenda, which is advance notice of site visits.
I've received no further, thanks, Chair.
Right, okay, and then in that case then we'll move on to item 6, which is the planning appeals update.
Thank you, Chair. With regard to the planning appeals update, members may recall that they have received an addendum to the items listed in Appendix A with regard to enforcement. That's just a clarification that the nature of the problem categories were mistakenly put the wrong way round. So it was just to clarify that with regard to that appeal decision at Barn Meadow Farm. With regard to Appendix B and pending appeals, we have had some updates. The first one that's mentioned is land at Foss Corner, Millers Lane, Foss Way, Monks Kirby. That particular reference there is relating to the planning appeal, so Appeal E. That decision was dismissed by the Inspectorate on grounds of that very special circumstances were not proven or outweighed by the harm to the Greenbelt and the surrounding area. We've also had a decision on the Old Village Hall at Pelton Road, Harbour Magna, and that appeal was dismissed on the grounds of bad design to the building. And finally, with regard to our enforcement appeals, we've had a decision following on from the Appeal E, the planning appeal at Monks Kirby, the Millers Lane application, appeals A to D. The enforcement notices were upheld, so therefore the appeals were dismissed. However, the inspector did vary the time for compliance from 28 days and 3 months. There were 2 different timeframes in there to actually give the applicants 12 months to comply with the enforcement notices, which primarily focus on the current applicants and occupants leaving the site and returning it back to the state that it was previously in before they occupied it. That's it from Appeals Update. Thank you, Chair.
Have we got any questions on that? To Richard? No? That's all fairly straightforward. Thank you very much, Richard. Right, we can move on then to item number 7 on the agenda, which is delegated decisions. Thanks for that. In that case, then we will move on to item 8, which is a motion to exclude the public under section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972. So, all those in favour of that, please show. Okay, in that case then, can we stop the live stream?